Of thousands of others, nearer the center of the explosion, there was no trace. They vanished, where thousands of pleas were not heard, where hundreds of sins that will never erase, where we are forced to believe humanity doesn't reside, Hiroshima still exists. The day which reminds us the irony of killing thousands to save thousands. Yes, Hiroshima still exists. Dear friends, we, the group members of Group 3, are here with a presentation to recall the wild, treacherous bombarding of two cities of Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which is to be observed on August 6. And as Pablo Picasso said, the genius of Einstein leads to Hiroshima. Every positive value has its price in negative terms. Hiroshima stands on a flat river delta with few hills or natural features to limit the blast. On 6th August 1945, an atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima by US Air Forces. This was the first time a nuclear weapon had ever been used. The fireball created by the bomb destroyed 13 square kilometers of the city. 3 days later, a second atomic bomb was dropped on the city of Nagasaki, and it all began with the Second World War. Now, let's get to know in brief about the Second World War and how it shocked the world. World War II, or the Second World War, was a global war that lasted from 1939 to 1945, involving the vast majorities of the world's countries, including all of the great powers, forming two opposing military alliances, the Allies and the Axis powers. World War II was by far the most deadliest conflict in human history. World War II began in Europe on September 1, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland. And in brief, causes that led to Second World War are the failure of peace efforts, the rise of fascism, formation of Axis coalition, German aggression in Europe, the worldwide Great Depression, Mukden incident and the invasion of Manchuria, Japan invades China, Pearl Harbor and simultaneous invasions, and a lot more. The Second World War ended with the defeat of Germany. The Japanese surrender occurred after the United States dropping atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. World War II was the deadliest military conflict in history in terms of total dead, with some 75 million people casualties, including military and civilians, or around 3% of the world's entire population at that time. Many died because of deliberate genocide, massacres, mass bombings, disease, and starvation. Following World War II, the United States emerged as one of the two dominant superpowers, turning away from its traditional isolationism and towards increased international involvement. Japan's surprise attack on Pearl Harbor would drive the United States out of the isolation and into World War II, a conflict that would never end with Japan's surrender after the devastating nuclear bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
The attack on Pearl Harbor was a surprise military strike by the Imperial Japanese Navy Air Service upon the United States, a neutral country at that time, against a naval base at Pearl Harbor in Honolulu Territory, Hawaii. On the morning of 7 December 1941, at 7:55 a.m., 183 aircraft of the Japanese Navy attacked the United States naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. Their intention was to destroy and damage as much as of the US Pacific Fleet as possible before it could respond to the Japanese operation taking place on the same day against the British, Dutch, and US territories in the Southeast Asia. The Japanese military leadership referred to the attack as Hawaii Operation and Operation A. The attack wave began bombing the hangars and parked aircraft in the island's airfield, while at the same time launching torpedoes against the US warship moored in the harbor. In the first 5 minutes of the attack, four battleships were hit, including the USS Oklahoma and the USS Arizona. Minutes later, the Arizona exploded after a bomb hit its ground powder store, shrinking uh, the ship and killing 1,177 of its crew. This devastation attack was followed an hour and a half by a second wave of 170 Japanese aircraft. Within 2 hours, 18 US warships have been sunk or damaged, 188 aircraft destroyed, and 2,403 American servicemen and women were killed. Before the attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States had been supporting Allied forces with weapons and supplies under the Lend-Lease Agreement. The attack led to the United States' formal entry into the World War II. The day after the attack, President Franklin D. Roosevelt delivered a speech to the United States Congress urging for a formal declaration of war against Japan.
Good morning, friends and teachers. Today I am going to say why Hiroshima and Nagasaki were chosen to drop the bomb. In the early 1945, the US were still building the bomb and they certainly didn't know where or what to hit. They had several questions. Should it be a city? Should it be a military installation? Or should you just be displaying the bomb without killing anybody? So US formed a committee of officers and scientists to decide where the bomb should fall. The committee was decided to drop the bomb on less deadly target. The places on the list was a remote military installation and Tokyo Bay, where the bomb would have detonated as a demonstration. But the target committee decided those options couldn't show the world the power of the new bomb. The US wanted people to understand that this is something different. The committee settled on two psychological objectives of the atomic bombing. First, to scare the Japanese into an unconditional surrender, and second, to impress the world by showing the power of the new weapon. So the target committee decided that the bomb had to kill. At that time, American bombers were firebombing many cities, killing tens of thousands. So they decided this bomb would not just kill, it will do something biblical. One bomb from one place would wipe a city off the map. It would be horrible, but they wanted it to be horrible to end the war and try to stop the future use of nuclear bombs. So they chose Hiroshima. Hiroshima was a real military target. There were factories and other facilities there. The army estimated the bomb killed around 70,000 to 80,000 people as Japan surrendered and the war ended. Thank you.
6th August 1945 was that black day in the history of the world that witnessed the failure of humanity. On 6th August 1945, the United States dropped an atomic bomb codenamed Little Boy over the city of Hiroshima. Little Boy was a uranium gun-type bomb that exploded with about 13 kilotons of force. Between 90,000 to 1,66,000 people are believed to have died from the bomb in 4-month period following the explosion. The bombing in Hiroshima, codenamed Operation Thunderbird 1, was approved by Curtis LeMay on August 4, 1945. The B-29 plane that carried Little Boy from Tinian Island to Hiroshima was known as Enola Gay, after pilot Paul Tibbetts' mother. Along with Tibbett, co-pilot Robert Lewis, bombardier Tom Ferriby, navigator Theodore Van Kirk, and tail gunner Robert Caron were the others on board the Enola Gay. Within seconds of bombing, the city of Hiroshima was entirely destroyed. 3 days later, on 9th August 1945, a second atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, a 21 kiloton plutonium device named Fatman. It is estimated that between 40,000 to 75,000 people died immediately following the atomic explosion. The city of Nagasaki, however, was not the primary target for the second atomic bomb. Instead, the selected target was Kokura, where Japan had one of its largest munitions plants. When the B-29 piloted Major Charles Sweeney reached Kokura, it was the thick clouds and drifting smoke from the city that obscured the aiming point and saved Kokura. This made them to head for the secondary target, Nagasaki. The failure to drop Fatman at precise aim point at Nagasaki confined the blast to the Urakami Valley, and a major portion of the city was saved. Hiroshima and Nagasaki showed what total destruction meant and remained the only use of nuclear weapons in armed conflicts. On August 15th, Imperial Japan surrendered, bringing the hostilities of World War II to a close. The bomb was not only dropped on the citizens of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it was dropped on the whole humanity. Yes, the war did come to an end, but the tragedy of Hiroshima and Nagasaki still continued and continues. Our friend Amana is here to take you close to the aftermath of the disaster.
The scale of the after effects due to the thermal rays emitted from the nuclear bomb came as a shocking surprise. Many lost their lives, and people who were exposed to the rays suffered very serious health consequences, especially burns and necrosis. Cells lost power to fight against infections. As an effect, people were rotting. Survivors suffered mentally due to terrifying trauma. The prevalence of anxiety symptoms and somatization symptoms was found even 20 years after the bombing. The consequences didn't end there. Starting from leukemia and thyroid cancer to esophagus, stomach, uterus, lung, and breast cancer, the cancer rate among the survivors increased. The rate of genetic disorders also increased. Today, about a third of the exposed are still alive, suffering from some or the other diseases. But Japan is a country of resilience. Despite the setbacks, Japan economy remained strong. 1945, Japan had just surrendered from Second World War and was under the United States. President Harry Truman appointed General Douglas MacArthur to demilitarize Japan and to convert Japan to a democracy. Japan then was in a state of turmoil after war. People were homeless, cities were scattered and suffered from massive food shortages. General MacArthur established reliable food networks through donations and US government loans. He also won support from the Japanese emperor and soon transitioned Japan into a democratic country. In 1946, April 10, Japan elected the first prime minister. In early 1950s, US withdrew its power and Japan became independent. From then, the rise of Japanese economy was shocking. In 1950s, Japan introduced new technologies into society and transformed into a consumer economy. The country became a hub of production of electronics and automobiles. The government invested highly in education, turning the country into a highly educated and productive workforce. Japanese product became renowned for precision and reliability of its product. In just 20 years, Japan, from poverty-stricken country which was under US, transformed to one of the highly developed country the world has ever seen. Even though the economy faced many challenges and setbacks, after the war it stood strong and became one of the most developed, world's largest creditor nation.
The whole world observes Hiroshima Day every year to remind the world where war can end, in the hope that no more Hiroshima and Nagasaki happen again. World leaders join hands. We observe Hiroshima Day in schools to make the future generation aware of the realities of war and need for the humanitarian values. On Hiroshima Day, the city of Hiroshima holds a peace memorial ceremony to console the victims of the atomic bombs. On this day, people pray for the realization of lasting world peace. The first such ceremony was held in the year 1947 by the then Hiroshima mayor Shinzo Hamai.
It takes around 10 seconds for the fireball from a nuclear explosion to reach its maximum size, but the effects last for decades and span across generations. We are still living in the aftershock of Hiroshima. People are still the scars of history. Japan learned from the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki that the tragedy wrought by nuclear weapons must never be repeated and that humanity and nuclear weapons cannot coexist. Hope our presentation made you aware of the treacherous bombarding of Hiroshima and hope no war could rule over humanity.